everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started. I'm Ron Kavanaugh, Executive Director of the Literary Freedom Project. We're a nonprofit based here in the Bronx, New York, and we do literary programs throughout the borough. Tonight, we are focused on One Book, One Bronx, and our partnership with the Casita Maria Center for Arts and Education. They're a community-based organization here in the Bronx. They make the book club, or they make their book club possible through this partnership. And it's really, we're continuing that idea of engaging the community through literature. That's what we at the Literary Freedom Project started doing. That's what Casita Maria in this partnership is doing. So we're deeply honored that we have Janet Rucker here tonight, who will, I guess you'll say a few words about Casita. I don't want to put you on the spot, but she's here and she'll tell you a little bit more about the Casita Maria Center for Arts and Education.
Yes,
Janet?
thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to see so many readers that are here tonight. So this is the Casita Maria and Literary Freedom Project's virtual book club. My name is Janet. I'm the manager of creative arts programs at Casita Maria. And normally we would have these book clubs in person in our gallery. Our gallery is located in our building at 928 Simpson Street in Hunts Point. And the exhibition we have in the gallery now is titled Brotherhood, which is the theme of the season for all of our programs. So those are like celebratory artworks that are really focusing on what it means to, as a community, embrace and celebrate a philosophy of warmth and equality toward one another. So we try to create a space for reflection, as can be seen through our exhibition. And I will very shortly put some links in the chat box that will include information if you want to see the exhibit in person. Please do reach out to me directly and we'll arrange like a one-on-one tour. And there's also information about the exhibit online on our website. I'm also going to put in the chat a link to the New York Public Library. They have a catalog of free books that you can download. So that just to, expand your library as we're in this pandemic. So thank you all for being here tonight, for being part of this. It's really great to see you all here.
Thank you so much, Janet. And Janet and Casita Maria have been a wonderful partner. Janet is relatively new to Casita, but Casita Maria has been an excellent partner, again, aligned with the mission that we both share. So we're thankful to have them as partners. I thank you all for coming out tonight. We'll be reading, or at least discussing, the early parts of, I think, pages 1 through 47, chapters 1 through 4 of tonight's book, My Sister. So with that said, we haven't seen her in a really long time, but Brandon Janice is back. I know she got some new stuff going on in the apartment. I don't know what's behind her, but
oh, over here?
Yeah, you got
turtle tank.
But anyway, Brandon is a facilitator, writer. I don't know, you do a bunch of stuff. She has a podcast that she never talks about. She has a podcast. And I listened to the most recent season also. So I'll put a link in the chat, because Brandon will not do it. So I'll put a link in the chat for her podcast. It's like a big deal, y'all.
I try not to brag, but it is pretty cool.
It's a big deal. But anyway,
Ron.
Thank you, Brandon. So Brandon will be the facilitator for the rest of the evening.
Yay. I'm so glad to see everybody, new faces, old friends. So if y'all don't mind, I'm kind of ready to get right into it. Outside of knowing the actress from one book from Orange is the New Black, I mean, I don't really know anything about, I mean, I've lived in the Bronx for 4 years. I'm originally from Michigan, but I don't really connect. I didn't think that I could connect to this story. And I don't know why. I just thought it was going to be one of those books that I read and it'd be me reading someone else's story and not really bringing a personal connection to it. But I don't think that is going to be true at all. And one of the main reasons why I've kind of shifted my thinking after reading the first 49 pages is because just reflecting back on the way the book is written, that concept of storytelling is a very Black American way of like sharing stories and learning history. And I'm also realizing that it's very Latinx as well, right? It's a very like brown way, Black and brown way of telling history, sharing thoughts, right? But on so many levels, like this story is like, take away everything else, take away the transition, take away the fact that the author is an actress on a very famous show, take away the environment being in the Bronx, like in the 90s, take all that away. And like, this story is on so many levels in so many ways, like a full expression of love energy, like the highest, being your highest self, being the best sister you can be, being the best mom you can be, being the best parents you can be, being the best student you can be. Like these pages to me really, I identified with them in on so many ways, even though I don't really have a connection to these two women at all on the outside. So I want to hear some other thoughts about that, the idea of reading a completely different story other than something that you can connect with almost immediately and feeling that connection in a way that you didn't think about. So that's one thing I want to talk about. But another thing I want to talk about as we begin is kind of the one of the biggest things that hit me in the book was like this undescribable connection with faith at the very beginning of the book that the parents have, praying and praying and traveling to Puerto Rico to go to the springs, like praying that their son would be okay and knowing that he would be okay regardless of what the doctors say, like that deep connection to faith. Those are kind of the two things that I want to start talking about. If anyone wants to jump in, that would be great. What did you think like about these first few pages as far as connecting to them, but being other in that way? Does that make sense? Reading a story about identity, feeling like thinking about your own identity in a way that you never had to before, you know?
I think for me, it was just interesting reading just the family love, the bond.
Yeah.
You know, they were fostering. They loved the children that came into the household, and the mother was determined that those children were going to be successful. So for me, it was just that love bond that was very evident.
Yes.
And that, you know, it was like most families that I know, the love, you know, we're going to love and we're going to take care of who we're in, you know, who's given to us. We're going to take care of them. And that's what I really, really loved just from these first couple of.
And that like full expression of love, no matter where you are. And I mean that on every level. And what I wrote down like that, what I just said, the full expression of love. But what I also wrote down is underneath, like, for example, taking care of a child that is not yours, an unknown child, you know, from a family you don't even know. That's like such a great expression of love. Having so much faith in God, having so much love for God that you trust him, you know, no matter what's going on, and you keep your promise to him or her. And also, like, I wrote down the love of change and the love of heroic acts. So yeah, I felt that. I feel that so deeply even still.
One thing that I found kind of interesting was, and it does feel, not to be critical, but it does feel like Selenis, the sister, um, is taking some poetic license
Mm.
in the sense that she is really giving, at the time he is Jose, a personality at a really young age. Like they are sensing his potential queerness. It seems like when he's like 1 and 2 years old, and
Very
that felt like, I mean, they do say kids, are definitely expressing who they are, almost out of the womb.
interesting.
But it felt like she was almost putting like queer stereotypes on Jose, like
Okay.
him. And again, the pronouns I'm using is based on the time in the book.
Oh
So
no, yeah,
now
yeah.
he's a he, um, but like he is doing hair and he wants to do makeup, and he's like 2 years old.
So that's so funny you said that because I wrote down two things about that, and then I really want to hear some other thoughts. The two things I wrote down was this. So like I know for a fact that people 100% are born the way they are born. My brother is gay. My older brother is gay. He's 4 or 5 years older than me, and I've always known we've all always known, there was never a doubt in anybody's mind. Like it was very clear. And I know, at least for me, that was at the earliest I would have remembered him, which was when I was like two.
Yeah.
He must have been around like 7, right? So I mean, I wrote that down just to I wrote down maybe she was taking that poetic license in the sense that she's saying, this is what I remember, right? Like I know this is what was happening like then. Like she wrote that down to put it in there. This didn't come out of the blue. This is not a situation like that. Like this was this from the beginning, right? So that was one of the thoughts I had. But another thought that I had was like, maybe she's kind of, the author is kind of trying to play with the concept that richness of embracing freedom, right? Embracing who you are. It's never too early or too late, right? To like embrace that. Maybe that's also one thing I wrote down. I had the exact same thought though, Ron. Does anyone else want to chime in?
I'd like to say something. I don't know if anyone saw it, but I think it was like last year, and there was a couple, a man and woman, and they had, married couple, and they had a child. And you don't know what the sex of the child was. The way the child was dressed, you didn't know if it was a little girl or a little boy. And they basically let the child pick the clothes they wanted to wear, the toys they wanted to play with, so that child could be whoever they were. Yeah. And it was, I think I saw it on TV, online or somewhere, but a lot of people were talking about it last year. And that's what this conversation reminds me of, because they're letting their child choose. And I guess there were some people who agreed with that and some people who don't. So, but you still don't know what the sex of the child is. But that child is going to be who they're born to be.
Yes.
What I thought was interesting was the parallels that they both kind of faced in existing between two worlds and navigating those spaces when she was going to LaGuardia into the city and like being around, I guess it was mostly white people, and then how Jose's experience with like living in this kind of straight world, right, with having the brothers toughen him up and things like that. So I thought that there was like this kind of parallel that they both were in, again, conversation with each other with their experiences.
Yeah, but they were so far, were they far apart in age? Maybe that's one thing I actually didn't have a rope, but they were pretty far apart in age.
Yeah.
So,
Because she's going to high school when
and
he's a
he's,
baby, when he's like
right.
2 or 3. So there has to be at least 12 years between them, at least, if not more. And she's dealing with her issues, while attending, those,
Yeah.
in the same way people are sort of putting expectations on Jose, she is also dealing with the expectations her classmates are putting on her about body shaming, um, you know, I guess shaming her ethnicity, her hair.
I think a lot of that was coming from her own family. Did y'all read into that? There was a lot of anti-Blackness at the beginning for sure. I definitely wanted to talk about that and bring
The Pelomalo, the bad hair praise. Yeah.
all of that, to my understanding, was happening at home.
I think school too,
yeah.
like Ron said, yeah, school too, because she started losing weight. She wanted to lose weight.
But initially the hair is that when they bring up the hair issue, good hair, bad hair, that's happening in the home. And she comments her hair is like somewhere in between the two brothers, her two brothers.
Is that anti-Black though? Like, I don't know.
Well, it definitely seemed like a colorism issue, especially when she was highlighting that one of the brothers, that the thing that saved him were like his light eyes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think she uses the word anti-Blackness. And I know she talks about like
Latinx.
still it being something that internalized racism is something that is still like a challenge for her.
Yeah, she was referring to how at the time Afro-Latinx identities were not something that were as widely embraced. So talking about growing up, in a Hispanic household where that was discouraged or not acknowledging Blackness of what their identity really was, and just kind of working that, whether be it Dominican background, Puerto Rican, but also, let's not overlook the fact that she's being traumatized at school as well. I mean, sexual harassment from the teachers.
Oh, yeah, from the teacher.
So it's really a matter of, she is a refuge for Jose, and Jose is a refuge for her. Because Jose is desperately waiting for her to come home each day, and she's not being accepted or treated right at school. And even if she's kind of locking her door and keeping Jose out at times when she's busy, she still kind of leans on him. So it's definitely a two-way street, I think.
It's that idea of like, they were both, I guess, struggling with an expression of identity, her with her weight and being overly sexualized, like most Black and brown girls are at a very young age, right? But also like having that connection. It was almost like this dream for her, right? To go to LaGuardia, go to high school and like be this actress, and then kind of having that like stripped of that fantasy, like stripped away from her almost daily, right? Had to be traumatizing. But I also kind of linked that, even though he's much younger, you're right, Ron, but I guess I kind of almost linked that with Jose and him having a beautiful time doing his sister's hair, and then that immediately being snatched away from him, once dad enters the driveway or when someone else comes into the room.
The brothers come home.
Sorry. No, I agree with a lot of the things everybody's saying, but I think the part that stood out to me is when they're in the living room and they're almost sneaking to comb her hair, the little boy, Jose, to comb her hair and to put on makeup. And even though they know they're going to get in trouble, it's like, it's like a secret thing, their own little world. And as soon as they say, the dad gets home, Jose, he kind of like runs away, like he was never, he was never there. And that part was interesting to me and kind of stood out.
Yeah, and I guess it just went a step deeper because she was it was very obvious. The adults in her life would make it very obvious that her hair was different, right? It was bad. It was not manageable. And so having Jose help her or do her hair, and the way she refers to the time they spend together while she's getting her hair done.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the way she said he untangled it with his fingers, and then, you know, came the brush.
I think
But like he was very accepting of it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not even, I don't even know if accepting is the right word. Maybe just like, love it.
Female traits, his female traits.
Yeah, I agree with you, Barbara. Right, like he knew how to deal with that texture of hair.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that she was just kind of making the connection between his feminine ways and how he didn't downplay what she looked like or the texture of her hair. And you know, I'm not exactly sure if I want to say it's anti-Black. People from the Spanish community,
hold on,
you know,
when just a little more.
When you say when she was referring to pelo malo and all of that stuff, people in the Spanish community have bad and good hair. So that's just like a phrase. I don't think that Spanish people are really just saying it like to be racist or to be anti-Black, because we come from all different colors and shapes and forms. So they're just saying, oh, pelo malo, you know, something like that. I don't know if that was in reference to that. I mean, I know they had mentioned things that makes you kind of feel like it's anti-Black, but I don't know if she was saying it like that, not with regards to that per se.
Well, I think it becomes anti-Black once there's like an internalization of it, you know, as being negative. So like that would make someone kind of have like this self-hatred for themselves.
And I don't think there's such a thing as good hair or bad hair.
It's on your head, so all hair is good.
That hair is hair, and that term bad hair is always placed on people of color or people who have curlier textured hair. And I think that was created out of racism, that, you know, the tighter your hair is, the worse it will be. And even with white people who might spend 2 hours a night brushing their hair, it's because they don't want that hair to get too curly, is that they are aiming for this quote unquote ideal of hair, which is straight.
I grew up with that internalization. My parents, my aunts, all of them would say to me, oh, your hair's not that bad. Because I had a combination of very, very tight curls and very fine curls. And then they'd say about my cousin, oh no, her hair is really bad. In Spanish, oh no, ese pelo grueso. In other words, it was like really thick and coarse. And I resented the remarks. You know, I grew up resenting those remarks. I grew up resenting people that said things like that to me. I always found it to be ignorant. I knew it just wasn't right. So when she mentioned it in the story, in the book, I could relate instantly to those feelings that she internalized. Those feelings of being less than, not being as pretty as everyone else with straight hair. I knew exactly what she was talking about.
Yeah.
And it's always been like that. Oh, you know, she's pretty for a Black girl. Or she's pretty for a dark girl. My family members said things like that to me.
Yes. Yes.
So I kind of, you know, like I understand that feeling that she had from that. And she probably felt so secure when he combed her hair, you know, because he dealt with it in a loving way, like Sharon said, in a really accepting, tolerant, and loving way, like it was beautiful, like it was anyone else's hair.
You know, I'm really glad that, thank you for sharing that, right? Because, I mean, I'm not gonna front, when she wrote, let's be very clear, what she wrote was on page 13, like in the middle of the page, she says, I was una mulata. Latinx cultures, like many cultures around the world, have a history of anti-Blackness that discriminates against those with darker skin and Afro features, right? And I guess I kind of rolled my eyes at that because I was like, this person right here is not a white passing person. So that really kind of like, I guess, elevated my feelings of identity when it comes to how layered and how different the anti-Blackness can look, because this person is saying it. So I don't know, something about her, hearing her story, hearing your story just now, I don't know, it's something that is really opening my mind into what I really mean, or what it really means to use that term, anti-Blackness. Does that make sense?
It does, Brandon.
It does.
Hold on, someone's at the door. I'm so sorry, you guys. Ron, I have to step away.
That's okay. That's okay. But you know what's interesting is that even with all the turmoil that's sort of going on in Selenis' life, she still has to navigate as the oldest. She mentions this, like, as the oldest child, oftentimes she has the responsibility of maintaining the household. So there are these foster children coming into the home. She is trying to excel at music and arts, or LaGuardia High School for Music and Arts. She has a brother who is diagnosed as terminal, and it just feels like there's going to be a breaking point for Selenis, trying to juggle all these different aspects and all these different issues that she is confronting, like literally every day. You know, every day she has to go to school. Every day the mom is taking care of kids. Every day she has, all of a sudden there's an extra sibling, but initially she had 2 siblings, but now she has 3, not including the foster kids. So there are a lot of issues that are going on that she now has to confront, but she is still giving all of this love, all of her love, or a lot of it, to Jose, who she is starting to protect. And I was just wondering, like, you know, how long, I'm sure it'll come out as we continue to read, but how long can she maintain this life?
Right, and I think that also speaks to like the resilience of children. I'm a school social worker, and you see how these children are parentified, right? They have to take care of the kids, they got to clean the home, do all that, and they're still expected to excel in school. And you know, there is definitely a resilience with that when she gives her story with wanting to go to LaGuardia, kind of having a plan of where the trajectory of her life is gonna go.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We were just talking, Brandon, about all the different things that are going on in Selenis's life between high school, taking care of the home, watching Jose. Like there has to be some kind of breaking point that she must deal with, and it might be in the next few pages, or the next pages that we read. But I could feel it coming, and how that breaking point might affect um, young Jose, as well as the parents who, the parents are not on like firm footing either. So I'm just like wondering, like what will give first?
You know, what do y'all think about the idea that this family that she refers to as a traditional immigrant family, which I thought was so beautiful because I don't know if I've ever seen those two words together before, traditional and immigrant. What do y'all think about the fact that maybe the breaking point hasn't came yet, or maybe it's not, talked about too big because in that family, that's how sturdy the love was. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter what you're going through, what you got going on. That's how great the foundation is. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Maybe we don't feel it because shit, maybe it's not there. That's how much they love each other. That's how much it does not matter. They got each other's back, so they are comfortable. They're not rich, but they're comfortable in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. They don't have much, but they have one another.
Right.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And I think you definitely feel that love just because like when you think of like taking kids in foster care, it's a business, right? So but it seems like their love kind of supersedes that, because when given the background story of how they're going to help these other families out when the child is surviving cancer, and that promise that they make, that it shows that it's not so much a business, but they're doing it because it's a passion.
Yeah. And it's a promise, they're doing what they said they were going to do. I mean, I want to kind of shift gears just a little bit here. If anyone has anything they want to chime in at any time to say, but one thing I wanted to ask you all was, and a lot of you were here for the last book that we read, How We Fight for Our Lives. And that book was all about identity as well, but it was all about identity of a gay male American Black, right? And I guess I felt some of the same elements of that story. A strong mother, strong love in a family and a household, and the struggle for identity, right? But one thing that I noticed that I thought was interesting was, C. Jones's identity was on trial. It was him being gay, and it was his sexual identity, right? He wasn't really struggling with being Black. He wasn't struggling with being a man. He wasn't struggling with being a professor or a writer. He was struggling to be sexually free, and which is a strong struggle as well. But what did y'all think about? What do y'all think about that idea of fighting for your freedom as far as sexual identity is concerned, and then fighting for your freedom in a different way that has nothing to do with, as far as we've read so far, this identity doesn't have anything to do with sexuality or even attraction. It's purely its identity of the self. What do y'all think about that idea?
I was thinking about there's just so much with this story, and I'm so I'm excited to see where it goes, especially the way it's turning to is from the Marizol's perspective and then Selenis' perspective. But as a Latina, and listening to the different identities and figuring out ourselves, there's a lot of colorism. There's a lot of things that we are placed on to our families of you just got to get through it to get through it. What you got to go through is what no, get over it. Push it, it's not, talking about identity and all these things at a time where who talks about that? Men do this, women do this. And then placing that idea and kind of bringing that back to your family, you know, that's kind of cultural, that's social, that's systemic and all of that. So it's interesting to see, you know, that the dynamics of the family and how Selenis just automatically embraces this young boy, but also that it gives her the support and love that she wants and needs when she's going to school and there's stuff that's going on over there, but also finding the identities between themselves in a time where there's no terminology, there's not much to go by, especially depending on how she grew up and where. I don't know if she's from the Bronx or I know from New York City, but like, you know.
Yeah, they're in the Bronx.
Yeah, in the Bronx. So you know, who knows what everyone else is talking about, and you know, talking about identity, you know, what is that? just be. You a girl, you gotta straighten the hair, you gotta get that's a whole thing. And I remember growing up like that, you know, you get the straight hair, you get the clothes and everything, and you move on. You know, talking about identity is not something that I remember talking about when I was younger. You know, now that's more of a thing. But I think, you know, also putting in perspective how the family and the grandparents and where they come from and what they're placing onto their children, and seeing that because of the family values, you see the acceptance and stuff like that moving forward. But it's an interesting question to ask about identity, especially for Latinos, and the idea of like what's going on in that time, if that makes sense.
I think that was beautiful. I obviously can talk a lot, but I would like to hear someone else respond to Jazzy.
I was just thinking how, you know, speaking about identity, how school just really breaks you down, whether it's the kids, whether it's the teachers, just like school as an institution was just the way she describes it, you know, just going to LaGuardia, you know, you think it's, you know, it's so exciting. She had to do all these things to get in, and then she gets there, and, you know, her body that, you know, she's too big, and, you know, I mean, she's comparing herself to these other girls, and she even starts getting this eating disorder. So I was just like, of all the, you know, it just sort of like a buildup from her family to you know, speaking about that anti-Blackness, just going to school, and, you know, the white girls, oh, you know, her you know, she talked about her leather jacket and how in the Bronx it was so, you know, right, it was so fly, but, you know, LaGuardia, right.
Yeah.
So I just thought, you know, again, that school, just what it does to our children, and it's just, you know, it's really just sad. And I thought the way that she described it was very, you know, yeah, I felt where she was coming from.
But also, in addition to what Greg mentioned earlier, all of that, but then also kind of having to deal with the predator, the teacher predator.
And then the parents didn't even want her help, you know, and they thought it was good. They were like, oh, she's, you know.
I don't even think they would have ever imagined that something like that would have been going on. The way that she described the parents, she was like a teacher or even a crossing guard. Like, you know what they're doing. You trust them. So yeah.
And I think also because like immigrant families, they put a lot of hope in these like systems, right? That they're kind of like idealized.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. This is Liliana. I was just gonna add that, I mean, this happens a lot in immigrant family where, like, yes, you put a lot of hope into the system. You think that the system will do everything that needs to be done. And like her going to school and getting basically sexually assaulted and not, you know, harassed by this teacher. And then, you know, hearing that he's calling her, and they see that, wow, like the teacher must really like her and think she's a good student, that he's, you know, he's calling her at home. And, you know, they see these figures as like, you know, they're the high standards, like doctors, and you know, you have your children basically translate everything, like you become a translator, you're holding, like, you know, holding all of this for your parents because they don't speak English. So it was like really heartbreaking, like reading that she went through that. And, you know, not being able to like have an outlet to talk to her parents about it. And then when she decides to talk to oh, am I getting ahead here? I don't want to know like if I'm getting, because I did read a lot.
So we're discussing
okay.
through to chapter 4.
Okay, let me not continue because I don't want to like, you know, give it away. But it's just like, you know, in immigrant families, like I was a translator for my parents, and they hold the teachers, you know, they praised them. They didn't think anything bad, you know, you placing your child in these kind of system, you know, you wouldn't think that something will happen such. So it's, you know, interesting to hear and see that.
You know what? Something that you said that just reminded me, actually. What you, Willie, and Rachel just said, it reminded me of another system that they, you know, were handling firsthand that clearly had failed, and that was the adoption or the foster care system. She kept just calling them they. I don't know exactly like what system that would have been, but that system, how it would have failed then Jose if they were not there and hadn't stepped in and taken care of him, how that system would have completely failed. I think at one point she said something like, I can't even believe how a system would give Jose back to Ruth. Like, I can't even believe that would happen, knowing that she was always habitually late, habitually high, like not getting her things together, doing what she was supposed to be doing, still dating this jerk. Like, I can't even believe that they would be okay with giving her a baby. So, you know, that coupled with the fact that what kind of Liliana just touched on, as immigrant families believing in these systems that they are going to work. Not only are they going to work, but they're going to work well, and they'll be like a well-oiled machine. But seeing these systems on display, I think, especially in these types of stories with these types of people, these families in particular, like we see like how deeply flawed they are. I don't know if you guys know, like not too long ago, there was like maybe a 10-part documentary on this little boy who I think maybe was 5 or 6. And he was in the system, had been adopted by somebody in his family, but then was given back to his parents, and they ended up killing him. So I think she like touches on that for a minute in the book, and she says like, seeing other stories and other cases where the system has failed, like just really hurts my heart. And that's one thing that I really, I thought a lot about, and how much in so many ways this family saved Marizol.
And even the mother, like even her empathy towards Ruth, you know, even though she saw her struggling, it was like, you know, she really wanted to like she really had high hopes for her too, like the same way that she does in the system, right? But it's just like, you know, she was really rooting for her. So I thought that that was important too, to kind of show that relationship and that dynamics, right? That they're just not kind of like othered or kind of like the bad figures, you know, but
Right.
that they were struggling with like really human issues, whether they be mental health, right? Because it's not just drug use, right? There's deeper rooted issues there. Mom may have had her own trauma, you know, so I thought it was important to tell that story too.
We didn't really get a lot of that story though, did we? Did you feel you got a lot of
It touched on it lightly, you know.
Yeah, but it's good that you pointed that out, because Mom was always rooting for the, you know, original families of the foster kids, hoping that eventually they would reunite with their children and live happily ever after. You know, I guess, I don't know if it was like that kind of just hope and faith and kind of romanticism that you have about family life, but she certainly did want them to be able to be together again. And Selenis kind of, you know, she felt differently. She disliked her totally, and she kind of knew that she just wasn't going to be that parent for Jose.
It also
And she
felt
felt judgmental. I'm sorry, Ron.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
just want,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that she never felt judgmental.
No.
You know how some people are just like, they probably judge, you know, someone who's on drugs or alcoholic or, you know, whatever that struggle is. You place judgment on them, and she never seemed to be that person, which I admired.
Yes.
It also felt like Selenis was a little, I mean, she is as responsible in this foster care dynamic as her parents are, because oftentimes she winds up, you know, watching the kids. But it felt like even she should have, I would hate to use the term known better, but she was getting way too connected to Jose, knowing that this is a foster care situation, and any day or with little notice, Jose would have been taken out of the, which happened. Jose would be taken out of the household and returned to the parents. I mean, that's always the ideal goal in a foster care situation, that it is short term and eventually or quickly the foster care child is returned to his or her family.
But, you know, we have to take into consideration the fact too that she was still a teenager, a child herself. And there was still that, that feeling, that overall feeling about her of immaturity, you know, when it came to the parents, like when she still wanted, remember when they got the little girl? She still wanted the little girl. And I was like, oh, what happened to Jose, you know? But she wanted that little sister. She still wanted that feeling of having a sister, right? So that to me showed that, yeah, she's still a child herself. You know, she's still immature in her response to these children.
I'm Robert. I came in late. I live here in the Bronx and was in the previous book club that Ron had organized. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
Hi, Robert.
Hello. Anna Marie, one of the things that you were saying kind of made me think about the scene where Jose is made to fight, where his brothers kind of tell him to get into this fight. And you know, there are these pressures to perform gender in certain ways, to perform masculinity or femininity. And I was wondering if Selenis is, you know, wanting to be, you know, that mom figure and to have a daughter or, to, you know, a child to care for, if that was her internalizing in some way, you know, some norms or some kinds of pressures that, you know, she as a woman or as a young developing woman, you know, girl was experiencing within her environment. So
yeah, I think that I want to say that's like the very first thing she mentions is that she never struggled with her identity. She was always very aware that she was a woman, a female, that she was the mothering type. She was always very into Barbies and playing house, and that was not a cross for her to bear, if you will, right? And I think that concept, her not ever having to struggle with her identity in that way, maybe because it felt natural, and maybe she just didn't really even think about it, but also I think that really what the book is going to show us, right, is that maybe it's because she didn't have like a spark to ever think about it, right? She didn't have a reason to ever think about it. What did she have reasons to think about? Her hair, right? Because her environment, the people in her environment told her that it was bad, right? What other things did she have to think about? Her weight, because the people in her environment told her that her weight wasn't the correct weight, right? So I think that I'm so glad you said that, because it's this idea, this is what I was thinking about when I was reading like last few pages, this idea of that your identity, if left up to your own devices, would be perfect, right? Because it would just be you. It would just be what you really feel inside and how you really feel. It is, right, when we come in contact with environment is when we are actively fighting to express ourselves, you know, either fighting to express ourselves or fighting to fit in. But either way, you know, you're trying to pick. Either way, you're trying to fit. You're trying to be on a side.
And that's definitely where you develop that awareness that you aren't like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, that scene where he's made to fight, and there is this like he's and I think they purposely did this, that there was a scene right before that, I think, or not too far away from that scene, where he did show violence when he slapped the mom. Do y'all remember this? He slapped the mom in the tub, like right kind of a few pages before that scene where he was asked to fight. So I thought about
the baby.
That was also when he returned from visiting the parents, remember?
Yep, and he had
some outward behaviors.
They actually called the foster parents to come and get Jose because he was crying so badly.
The mother.
The mother, right? And from the mother, and then when they get him is when Jose hits the foster mother. Yeah.
So it's not like he hadn't come in contact with that in his environment, right? It's not that he had been exposed to it in some way. So it's not that he didn't when he was asked to fight. It's not that he couldn't or wouldn't, or couldn't or never had, but it was just not in him, right? And that's so interesting that that was how he was made to prove his manhood, right?
The behavior to me, once he left his biological parents, was so questionable. I was wondering if he'd been abused, and they did find some bruises on him, excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, he did look like he had some mark on the back of his leg, like he might have been hit with a belt.
But I was wondering about sexual abuse because as she was bathing him is when he really started acting out. So I was uncertain about what went on exactly.
I didn't even think about that.
That's actually what I was thinking too.
But I'm not too sure about that, just because of was it Marisol? Was it Jose's version that he slapped the mother? Whose version was that?
That was Marisol's.
Right. So I think that I don't know. I think that if that was the case, that they would have been touched on, you know.
I think there's some things that they probably kept, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely.
But that seems kind of like germane to the story if he was sexually abused, as far as the whole foster care system is concerned.
Yeah. But this would have been abuse with his not foster parents. This would have been his real parents.
His real parents, yeah.
You know, what do y'all think? We're talking about this now. What do y'all think about the fact that as a child, Jose didn't speak until he was 3? Again, like not being able to express himself. Like, what do y'all think about that in connection to like the story as a whole? What we know?
I think it shows how, you know, like I said, I'm a social worker, a school social worker, so it shows like how kids like internalize these traumas, and then, you know, they can't meet their developmental milestones. So I think that like there's definitely a linkage between that and then like speaking to the bigger picture of like the broken foster care system, that, you know, just because a child visits their biological mother, like that in itself can be a trauma, because to them it can be like a complete stranger.
You're absolutely right.
And they weren't complete strangers. Well, they're not complete strangers, but they were very much, you know, out of his
His
guess-
dad was, right, Ron?
Yeah,
His dad was a complete stranger.
yeah, Dad
Yeah,
definitely
his
was.
dad.
Well, there
But
was
why
that scene where he was trying to force him to like
Mhm.
hug him or something. Have y'all ever been in a situation like that? Because I have, and I could feel the awkwardness. I could smell it when I was reading the book, you know?
Mhm. And by this time, Jose had already spent quite a bit of time with his foster parents,
Yeah.
with Selenis, and so yeah.
Right. So just how Selenis was talking about that kind of uncertainty, that's kind of what this little child is feeling, where it's just going to be that he can't focus because he doesn't know where his stable home is going to be, because that can be uprooted and changed at any time in the system.
Yes.
And we see that, I mean, I see that a lot in a lot of the children that I work with. So it's a sad story. But like I said, you know, children are resilient.
Children are resilient. Yes, yes, they really are, and forgiving, so forgiving.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And maybe it's me reading it the way that is, but does it seem like she kind of jumps around from ages? Because I do get confused, because at one point he couldn't talk, and then he grew up and was doing her hair. Because at one point I thought, oh, he's 2 years old and he's doing all that to her hair. So is there like or am I reading it incorrectly? Like she kind of jumps around with the ages, because I start getting confused on.
I don't think
they
so.
see.
No,
I actually don't. I think she's going in the right. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, y'all. But I think that even those scenes that we're talking about, the hair braiding or the hair scenes and all of that, I think that's, to my understanding, that's when he is really young, like 3 or 4.
that's what I questioned early on, for him to be doing all of this, you know, interaction with Selenis at such a young age. You know, I felt like Selenis Leyva may have taken some poetic license, which is, you know, her right to do, but it just seems like to have someone who is 2 or 3 years old, regardless of their gender, to be that adept at doing hair, or at least attempting to do hair, seemed like a little bit above what you would expect from a 2 or 3 year old. Again, I don't have 2 or 3 year olds running around my house trying to do my hair, so I don't know. But it seems like a bit much.
I definitely agree, Ron, because at one point it was like he's a makeup artist, but then he's like 3 years old. So that was a little confusing too. But I think he was just trying to really like throw on like these kind of like gender roles, and that there was like a real femininity with him, but definitely like magnified it by 1,000.
But
and
that's
like
what she's
and stereotypical, like you said too, Ron.
Right, exactly.
For me, I think that Selena's character is awkward. It's something very awkward about her character, like clinging to the child. You know, she wanted a sister, so did she project that she wanted a sister onto Jose? But it's something about her character that's awkward to me. You know?
What do you mean? Talk more about that.
It's like she's not telling us everything about her character. You know, did she baby him? Did she dress him in girls' clothing? She wanted a little sister so badly, remember?
Well, at one point she was saying like almost she kind of was trying to say like he wanted to be her. Like that's why he was combing her hair, and that's why he was doing he was doing all these things. That's what I got. She was kind of trying to, you know, that he really admired her, and he wanted to be a woman like her, or a girl like her. I don't know if anybody else got that, but
I think Marizol wrote that though. I think
right.
Yeah.
Right. That was from her perspective, right. But it was a lot. She was leading a lot to, I guess, what's gonna happen. You know, she was really, I felt like explaining a lot of why he is the way he is. You know, and I think like Ron said, that poetic license, like it was just really, I don't know how the kids say, a little bit. She was dragging it a little bit, I think I feel like, you know.
I agree with you and Sherry.
like to know more about Selenis for some reason. I just feel like they're dangling, like we're dangling about all of her, everything that she did or whatever she participated in regarding.
Yeah, Sherry, for me, it was kind of, I had that exact same thought, but my thoughts were more, I think I said it out loud. My thoughts were more along the lines of like, wait, hold on. Am I supposed to believe that this like fine Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx is just like the doting, perfect teenager out here in LaGuardia and then goes home and takes care of all the babies? Like, am I really supposed to believe that? Like, so that was one thing that I said. I think when I was reading it out loud, I was like, I love this book, but wait, hold on. Am I supposed to like believe that this girl is like really the saint? So I did think, I agree with you. It was something, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it was a lack of vulnerability.
I agree, Brandon and Sherry both, just because it was almost like this like saint. And then it was almost kind of like Marisol, when in the younger years kind of idolized her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a God complex going on.
I also wonder if, because I think the same thing, but I also wonder if this is her probably giving her sister more space to tell her story rather than hers. But then I'm looking and skimming through the pages, like there's equally the same amount of like from her voice and her sister Marisol voice. So like I wonder that whether she didn't want to tell too much of her own perspective, to give more space for her sister to tell that.
Great point, because even in real life, if you will, obviously the book is nonfiction, but even in like the real world, that idea would come up, right? Liliana, the fact that the sister is this very successful actress and she may be like playing down even in real life just to give people more space. For example, let's say she did give us a little more of her life and how she was growing up. And let's say it was very juicy and we really gravitated towards it. That's a different, it kind of takes away from, I think, the sister's story, the sister's transition.
And
Yeah, it could be. Sorry, Ron.
We also have to remember that this book will alternate between the two authors. So I would assume that the writers and editors would not want to give Selenis' storyline so much more gravity,
Yeah,
like to be a storyline separate from Marisol's storyline. So, because Marisol has still yet to sort of speak in the book. And we,
she spoke a lot, but not a lot, but she spoke. What do y'all think about that actually? What do y'all think about the times where we do hear from Marizol?
It's very obvious that they're getting traumatized from all sorts of angles and from a very young age. She makes it clear from the start of school, basically in first grade on page 40, the classmates were not letting up on her, saying, why do you talk like that? Why do you talk like that? Calling him the F word.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of sends him on this trajectory, and couple that with how he felt even being at home when he's talking about the parties when the extended family would come over and the men are in one room, the women are in another, and he tries to be in the room with the women and they kind of shoo him off to talk with the men who are talking about football and playing dominoes, and he can't relate. So it's like no environment is a welcoming environment for him.
Yeah, I think that definitely seems to be the theme, even because from a baby, it's like not really accepted anywhere, right? Not even from their own parents.
So in a sense, right, that idea of not belonging to any space, it almost gives you a little more motivation to truly figure out who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like not having really any ties to anything, not being in a place or a position where you might disappoint somebody. It gives you more room to grow in that sense, or to at least explore and figure out who you are on a deeper level. Does that make sense?
But you know what I do appreciate, and I don't know if anybody said anything, how they structured the story of understanding Jose and then learning about Marisol and the pronouns, and being very highly conscious of, we will be using he during this time, so that story's being told. And I just wonder, like, you know, going back into that space of like trying to figure out who you are and then have to write about it, especially when you're Marisol, you're no longer Jose, and then you have to write about those times in the book. But I like that in the beginning that is prefaced so that people understand this is a journey. This is kind of like the trajectory and stuff that it was very.
I mean, yeah, to be honest with you, I think they did that, you know, partly because of what you were talking about earlier, how when you were growing up, you know, in your community, identity, you weren't talking about identity. It wasn't a thing. So you definitely weren't talking about like dead naming. You weren't talking about trans people. You know what I'm saying? So it's like really needed more. It wasn't just like, to me, it wasn't just like filler introduction. You know, it was like almost like a glossary, you know, like you almost like need this part in the book to, like, if you're going to go on this journey with us, then you need to know like these very
you need an index
touchy things. What were you saying, Anne-Marie?
I said you need an index to follow.
Yeah.
I think it's also really good though, because you get to see, like, you know, a different perspective too, right? This isn't just a story told from a trans woman's point of view, but really someone who was really close to them too, so they can have that conversation through the text.
Also, right, that transitioning is, you know, is a family thing also. You know, it's not, you're not just alone in that. There's other people in your life that are, you know, I don't know if affected is a good word, but are also in that transition with you.
Yeah.
But I think also when you were saying that dead naming thing, that was important, that background knowledge, because I mean, I've never even heard that expression. You know what I mean? I didn't even know anything about that. So, you know, it was good to kind of know about, and like she said in the introduction, like calling someone by their old name is an act of violence. I was like, whoa, I didn't, you know what I mean? Like that's important, you know, to know. So it was good, that introduction.
Yeah, I appreciated it too. I wondered about, I really actually also, just really quickly talking about the introduction, I really like how they kind of put on the front line that, you know, memory is a fickle thing, you know, like it's funny how you know, you can grow up in the same house with somebody and have two completely different memories of what happened. And I think that, you know, I needed that. I needed to read that, like knowing how close they were and knowing how close these stories were going to be. I needed to understand that they understood that maybe they didn't have the same memories. And I think that's made really apparent when they're talking about Christmas. It's like on the same page and they're going back and forth talking about the same Christmas day. And I think at one point, Selenis is like, yeah, Jose loved his presents, or he was smiling, but I don't think he liked his presents. And then the next paragraph is Marizol, and she's like, yeah, no, I hated all of this stuff. You know, I wasn't happy about it. Like I was crying, you know?
Right, and there was so much pain in that, but at the same time, it was like a little humorous too.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to say, if anyone who hasn't said anything yet, if you would like to chime in or ask a question or just share a thought, I think now would be a great time.
Well, I think memory is based on perception as well. You can experience the same thing. My sister and I had a long talk years ago where we came to the conclusion that, yeah, we had the same parents, but we didn't have the same parents. Like she experienced my parents in a totally different way than I experienced my parents. And I think that the whole thing between Jose / Marizol and Selenis plays into that. that you both can look at the same sunset and you're going to experience it differently.
Yes. Yes.
I totally agree with that, Linda. Many times I've gone into it with my brother and sister because I say to them, oh, you're playing revisionist history, you know, you're revising. But it's not so much revisionist history as that they remember things in a different way than I do, right? Their experience is different. I'm the oldest in the family, and the way I was treated was very different from the way my brother was treated and my baby sister was treated. She was treated like
That's exactly, that's it. My sister
Right?
was the oldest and I'm the babies. We had the
it's
same
a
parents,
different
but
experience.
we didn't have the same parents.
You're right. I didn't get up to that part yet with Marizol and Selenis, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's like the last, actually literally the last page, or one of the last pages.
Is that before section 2 or part 2?
It's you're talking about the Christmas part that I was just referring to?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
literally,
didn't get to that yet.
yep, it's just chapter 4. Now that I'm looking at it, like in the actual book, it's just chapter 4. It's literally only like 2 pages. I guess, I'm really enjoying how this is it's letting me figure out, it's telling the story, you know, of how they see it, you know, and the facts, and it's letting me kind of figure out how I feel and listen to the story rather than like shoving a perspective or shoving like an angle or a journey down my throat. I do really feel that I'm listening to a story and not reading a story, if that makes any sense. Does anyone have any kind of thoughts around those lines, like just craft wise, like how the book is written, like how you read it, how you receive it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely in conversation with each other, and that's how I kind of read it. You know, when I was reading Selenis's part first, and then reading Marisol's part, I was like, okay, so she's kind of talking to, you know, what Selenis was kind of talking about. And I wanted to talk just touch on something earlier when you were saying about like could the child Jose have been molested, right? When someone had brought that up. And I think that it's important that um you know, if that's not the case, that you know that they're not, that they haven't alluded to that, right? Because a lot of people have like these misperceptions as like trans people or gay people are gay or trans because they were molested.
You know, I think that's really interesting you say that, and I think we should talk about it because I agree with you 100%. But I also think that even when you're writing something, and they are really far away from this by now, they got to be at least 30 years, you know, away from this time that we're reading right now. So, you know, they have had time to really reflect on the past. And one thing, I agree with you, but I will say that, you know, possibly, even though they've had all that time to reflect, it's still, if something like that, any type of sexual harassment in the home did happen, maybe it is still too close for them to talk about. That could be one thing. And I only say that because, and I'm looking for it, it's a very specific line that I felt when I read it, alluded to some sort of harassment or some sort of violence, and it's so subtle. It's when Marizol is talking about going to the prison to see Jose Sr. Do y'all remember this?
Yeah,
Marizol
I
is talking
think
when she's talking about going to the prison to see Jose Sr., I can't find it now. She literally, it's a line break. She's like, says she walks in and then she sees him, Jose Jr. or Jose Sr. And like, then it was a period. And it's so subtle, but for me, it felt so big and so weighted.
You thought it spoke to like Jose Sr., kind of maybe?
I thought in some sort, not necessarily sexual, but some sort of fuzziness that she was not ready to reveal.
I mean, I could see that. I mean, and I think especially with him being overbearing with like, give me a hug, call me papi, you know?
Yeah, what was their
mean,
phrase? It was something
Yeah,
like,
bendición papi.
yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like it gets questions going, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that it hasn't, like, if that was the case, it wasn't just straight out said, you know?
Yeah.
So that way people could, you know, with certain misperceptions, be like, that's why.
Right.
Yeah.
I figured it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you're writing a memoir, even if that feels a little too close, you have to, something like that, you would have to include in the memoir, to me anyway. Like to leave that out, it would be not that it is germane to who Marisol becomes, but anytime you're, this is how I feel as a reader, anytime there's any kind of sexual abuse situation and you leave it out, that's a big thing to leave out of a memoir. You know?
It's like Brandon was saying, though, that maybe they're not at the point yet where they feel they can tackle that. And the page I think you're referring to, if I'm correct, is 44, when they visit the prison. And the paragraph is, his voice made me cringe. I became angry and started to shut down and go numb. Maybe somewhere around there is what you're referring to.
And that was the line right before them. Actually, the line right before it was the one I was referring to. And then I heard him. Like there was something about that, and the sentences after, but that drop right there, she notices the metal bars and then she heard him. There's something about that, like, that's kind of how memory works. It's like not necessarily remembering things that happened. It's really like sounds, voices, it's smells, it's scents, you know? So there was something there that,
I mean, even to the fact that he focused that focuses so much when telling the story about like why did Ruth leave me alone with Jose, you know, and almost despising her because of that.
yes, and there was nothing after that. You're absolutely right, Willie. It was like the girls were in the front room, and then he tried to go into the front room, and Jose Sr. wouldn't let him. And then yeah. So I mean, I think that, to be honest, I almost think that if there were some sexual abuse and if it were detailed, I think that would almost be too easy, you know, for the reader and for the author. I think that would almost be too easy. I think we if it is in the chapters, I haven't read yet, if it is there, I'm glad it didn't show up actually. I see what you're saying, Ron, but I'm glad that it's not the first thing put on front blast. Like, I don't know. Does anyone else have?
I think it'll present itself for sure. I think there's definitely some kind of sexual abuse going on there. The author might not be ready for us to accept it or to share that with us yet, but I think they will. I mean, all of the little hints and little things that they say, it sounds like there are.
Like, what were some that stood out for you, for example? Because
just like Willie, I think he had mentioned just the kind of always just saying, oh, bendición, like it's just like that reassuring, you need to say certain things, him cringing at the voice, just a lot of little things like that. The lashing out of the mom in the beginning when she was giving him a little bath and then he just hit her or slapped her, that was definitely signs of some kind of abuse going on.
Yeah.
I was gonna go, to Willie's point. I mean, I totally agree, Barbara, that there's definitely signs of some form of abuse, but Willie, if I understood where you were taking this, is that, when we're confronted with difference, I think, in my own experience, I, often look for a cause or a reason or something to explain the difference that I see, or, and, with, you know, um, um, with this particular kind of difference, it can be pathologized, or, you know, we can try to explain, these differences in terms that don't necessarily respect just the fundamental difference, and letting the person be who they are. And, I find that just in my professional life and everyday life to be challenging, just letting people be, and we are caught, I mean, there are a lot of things that make us who we are, and a lot of experiences that we have cause us to be certain ways. But then at the base of it, I wonder sometimes, if, there is this identity, as the story seems to be, projecting for us, of being born not in the body that is expressive of your sense of self. There's no necessarily clear cause, for that.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, and thank you for sharing that. And one thing that I was thinking about while you were talking was that idea of not being able to accept one thing without the other, right? Not being able to, completely refusing or being even more confused at something that is other, if the explanation that we are most comfortable with is doesn't fit. Um, and it's almost in that sense, it's almost like we become like complete and totally like submissive to these like societal pillars that we've like completely, now we agree to that now. Like, oh, somebody's gay, they must have been sexually abused. You know what I'm saying? It's like we immediately got to go there. And it's almost like, okay, what are you without that though? Are you able to accept somebody without all of that? Without having to figure out why they are not exactly like you, right? Are you able to sympathize without having to have like an explanation, right, as to why you're being sympathetic or empathetic? So I think that, yeah, I think that what you just said kind of just really even opened up my mind even more in going ahead in the reading, right? And I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to attempt to stop looking for clues, right? Stop looking for reasons and stop looking for like check boxes to check off like it's a scavenger hunt, like it's and like kind of just listen to the story, right? Like just fully listen without making it seem like I'm going to have a pop quiz afterwards. Because I think that's how I've been reading this so far, is like really not closely, but really anticipating something or trying to figure out the ending in my head or something. Does that make sense? That's a new thought, but
Yeah, Brandon, I definitely think so. Just because, like you said, it's always going to be like that question of like, but why? And it doesn't necessarily need to be answered.
right. Or it doesn't need to be answered the way that we are so, most comfortable with it being answered. I think that's something I'm exploring with this book too. Is like being okay with the answer that is presented to me.